I don't know why I noticed her that morning. Maybe because she was the only person who didn't look like they were rushing through their life. Everyone else in the coffee shop had phones in their faces, laptops open, earbuds jammed in. She just sat there with a paperback and a cup cooling beside her. I'd seen her before. Not here, but at my friend Daniel's house. She was his mom, the one who'd ask if we wanted more food, the one who'd stand in the doorway like she was part of the background. I never thought of her much then, at least not the way I did now. I was halfway through ordering my coffee when she glanced up and caught me looking. Not long, just enough to make me feel like I'd been caught in something. She smiled, polite but warm, then dropped her eyes back to her book. I almost left it at that. But my order came out wrong, 2 sugars instead of none. And I don't know what made me do it, but I sat 2 tables over from her. Close enough to feel her presence, far enough to pretend it was an accident. For a while, all I did was stir my coffee, even though it didn't need stirring. Your spoon's going to disappear in there if you keep that up. Her voice was calm, amused, like she hadn't spoken to anyone all morning. I looked up. Bad habit. Or nerves, she said, eyes flicking toward my hand. Then, softer, Daniel still keeping you busy? It felt strange, my friend's mom remembering me, remembering my name without saying it. Yeah, he's the same, I said. Still thinks microwaving pizza counts as cooking. That got the smallest laugh out of her. Not loud, but enough to warm the air between us. We talked a little. Nothing heavy. Books she pretended to finish, classes I wasn't sure I liked. The weather doing that in-between thing where you can't tell if it's still winter. But what I remember more than her words were the pauses. She'd look at me like she wanted to keep going, then pull back. I did the same. It was like walking near the edge of something without stepping over. Her phone buzzed once on the table. She glanced at it, then turned it face down without reading. I don't know why, but that stuck with me. When I left, she didn't stand or wave. Just a quiet, good luck on your midterms. Like she'd been keeping track. Outside, I pulled my phone out of my pocket, opened a blank text, closed it again, walked halfway down the block, then checked anyway. Nothing. Until later that night. One message. Her name. Just 6 words. This stays between us. Okay. And that was the first time I realized I wasn't just noticing her. She was noticing me back. White heavy checkmark hook. Yes. Quiet. Ordinary setting with intrigue. White heavy checkmark attraction. Through eye contact, small joke, her remembering him. White heavy checkmark loneliness. His unsent text plus stirring coffee. White heavy checkmark ending. Reflective cliffhanger. Her unexpected message that I didn't answer her text that night. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how. The next time I saw her was a week later. Daniel had asked me to drop off a book he'd borrowed and forgotten, and I ended up standing at her front door with it in my hand. She opened it halfway, surprised. You're here for him? Yeah. He forgot this. I held out the book like it explained everything. She nodded, took it, and for a second, I thought that was it. But then she stepped aside. You can wait. He should be back soon. I went in. The house smelled like tea and laundry detergent. Lived in. Softer than Daniel ever admitted. She poured me a cup without asking. Chamomile. I don't even like tea, but I drank it anyway. You're quieter than the other boys, she said after a while. You always were. I shrugged. Guess I'm not good at filling silence. That's not a flaw. She stirred her own cup, slow, watching the spoon move. Some people talk to hide things. Silence can be honest. It felt like she was saying more, but I didn't push. She told me she used to read to Daniel when he was a kid, whole chapters out loud until her throat hurt. Then she laughed, a little embarrassed. He probably doesn't even remember. That's the thing about being a mom. The moments that broke you open don't always leave marks on them. I didn't know what to say, but I wanted to. Her words felt heavier than the room they were in. For a while, we just sat there with the tea cooling between us. I noticed the lines around her eyes when she smiled, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear and let it fall back again. She wasn't trying to be anything other than herself. That was what made it harder, because every time she looked at me, I remembered who she was, my friend's mom. Too old for me, too close, too impossible. And yet, when she reached across the table to take my empty cup, her fingers brushed mine. Barely a touch, not even long enough to count. but something in it stayed. Later, when I walked home, I couldn't stop replaying it. That simple, ordinary gesture. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. White heavy checkmark, personal truth revealed. Her memory of reading to her son. White heavy checkmark, risky connection shown. She is his friend's mom, divorced, older. White heavy checkmark, internal conflict. He keeps reminding himself it's impossible. White heavy checkmark, small moment of tension, shared tea, accidental touch. White heavy checkmark, strong reflective pivot ending that I started finding excuses to pass by her house. Not always on purpose, or at least that's what I told myself. Sometimes Daniel was there, sometimes not. The times he wasn't were the ones that stayed with me. One evening, she opened the door before I even knocked, like she'd been expecting someone, or maybe just listening. "Daniel?" she asked first. "No, just me." Her face softened and then flickered, like she wasn't sure if that was good or bad. She stepped aside anyway. Inside, the lights were low. The TV played quietly in the background, some show neither of us were watching. She asked if I wanted tea again, but her hands hesitated over the cups. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. Too far. Too close. The silence felt different this time. Thicker, harder to breathe through. "You should be out with people your own age," she said suddenly. Not sharp. More like she was trying to remind herself. I laughed once, too quickly. "They don't notice when I'm there." She glanced at me then, really looked. Her lips parted like she had something to say, but she just pressed them together. I noticed her hand resting on the cushion, fingers curled slightly, like she wasn't sure if they belonged there. I had to stop myself from reaching across the space. The knock on the door saved me, or ruined me. It was Daniel, dropping by unannounced, tossing his keys on the counter like it was still his place. He greeted me without surprise. "Didn't know you'd be here, man." I shrugged. "Just passing through." He went straight to his room, the door closing behind him. But the air between us had already changed. We sat quieter, farther apart than before. She let out a breath I don't think she knew she was holding. "You should go." I nodded, but I didn't stand. Not yet. The TV light flickered across her face. She looked tired, like she'd been fighting something invisible. I wanted to ask what. I wanted to say too much. Instead, I leaned forward to pick up my jacket. My shoulder brushed hers. Not much, barely anything, but she froze. Our faces turned at the same time. Too close. Close enough that I could see the faintest line at the corner of her mouth, the way her breath caught. She didn't move. Neither did I. For half a second, it felt like gravity had shifted, pulling us towards something neither of us had agreed to. Then her eyes closed, just for a heartbeat, like she was about to let it happen. But when they opened, she leaned back, pulled away, and I did what I always do. Pretended it hadn't almost happened that it was late afternoon when I ran into her outside the grocery store. She had a paper bag tucked under one arm, and the wind kept tugging at her hair. "Need a hand?" I asked before I even thought. She gave me a look, half smile, half warning. "I'm fine." But the bag was heavy, and I carried it anyway. We walked back toward her place together, slower than either of us needed to. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet where even footsteps sounded louder than they should. She broke it first. "Daniel tells me you're thinking about transferring schools." I shrugged. "Maybe. Doesn't feel like anyone would notice if I left." "That's not true." The way she said it made me stop. She didn't look at me, just kept walking. Her knuckles tightened on the paper bag like she was holding something back. I caught up to her. Then who would? She finally turned. For a second, I thought she was going to say it. Her mouth opened, then closed again. A pause, heavy, stretching between us. We reached the small park near her street and sat on a bench without deciding to. She set the bag down by her feet. "You remind me of someone," she said finally. Her voice was quiet, like she was confessing something. "Me. When I was your age. Always half in the room, half somewhere else." I didn't answer, just listened. "It's a dangerous way to live," she added. The silence after that felt sharp. I wanted to tell her she was the only person who seemed to notice I was even like that. That maybe she was the only person who noticed me at all. But the word stuck. Instead, I said, "You don't have to worry about me." Her laugh was small and sad. "That's exactly why I do." I don't know what made me reach for it, but my hand brushed the edge of the bag by her feet. I set it upright, steadied it. When I let go, my fingers grazed hers. She didn't move away this time. Not right away. Her eyes met mine, steady, searching. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. Not about the bench. Not about the groceries. I swallowed. Do you want me to go? Her breath caught. I saw it in the way her chest rose, the way her lips parted, but no sound came. The pause stretched until it felt like it might break. And then she asked, almost too softly to hear, would you? After that afternoon on the bench, I thought things would tip one way or the other. But instead, everything stalled. I didn't see her at the coffee shop anymore. Didn't bump into her outside the grocery store. Even Daniel stopped inviting me over, though I couldn't tell if that was her doing or just him drifting the way friends do. A week passed. Then two. When I finally did see her again, it was by accident. She was walking out of the library with a stack of books pressed to her chest. She saw me before I saw her. For a moment, I thought she'd stop. But she just gave a small, polite nod and kept moving, like I was no one. I stood there longer than I should have, watching her walk away until she disappeared around the corner. That night, I almost texted her. Almost typed, did I do something? Then erased it. Started again, we need to talk. Deleted that too. In the end, my screen stayed blank. A few days later, Daniel mentioned, casually, the way people do when they don't know they're breaking you. Mom's been talking to my dad again. Weird, right? After all this time. I didn't know she was still in touch with him. I didn't know if she wanted to be. I didn't know anything, really. It explained the distance, maybe. Or maybe it was never about me at all. I kept replaying the way she'd asked me on the bench. Would you? Would I what? Leave? Stay? Cross the line she couldn't? The question stuck like a stone in my throat. I tried to move on. Sat with friends at lunch, nodded through their stories. Laughed when I was supposed to. But it felt like I was underwater, hearing everything muffled, far away. One evening, I walked past her house. Lights were on in the kitchen. The shape of her moving, blurred through the curtain. I stood on the sidewalk, hands deep in my pockets, fighting with myself. Knock. Don't knock. I imagined it. Her opening the door, surprised. Maybe relieved. Maybe not. Maybe she'd shut it again, quietly, like nothing had ever happened. In the end, I kept walking. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was raining the night I saw her again. Not heavy, just enough to make the streets shine, enough to make everyone else hurry. I wasn't planning to stop by. My feet just carried me there. Her house. Lights on in the kitchen, warm against the wet glass. For the first time in weeks, I knocked. She opened the door slowly, like she wasn't sure who'd be there. When she saw me, her hand tightened on the frame. No smile. But she didn't close it either. You shouldn't, she started. Then stopped. I know, I said. My jacket was dripping, and I felt ridiculous standing there. I didn't want it to end like this. Like we never. She looked over her shoulder, then back at me. Daniel's not here. I'm not here for him. That hung between us, louder than anything I could have shouted. She stepped aside. I walked in. The kitchen smelled like tea again, faint and familiar. She moved quietly, setting a cup down in front of me like nothing had changed. For a long while, we didn't talk. Just the sound of rain against the window. Finally, she said, you deserve someone who can give you more. Her fingers curled around her own cup, but she didn't drink. I don't even know what I'm doing half the time. I shook my head. Neither do I. That got the smallest laugh from her. Tired, but real. I leaned forward, hands around the warm ceramic. But I know I haven't felt this, seen, by anyone else. The words came out quieter than I meant. Almost like I was afraid they'd break if I spoke them too clearly. She closed her eyes, exhaled slow. Don't say that. Why not? Because it makes it harder to stop. Silence stretched. Her hand shifted across the table, just barely brushing mine. A small touch, but it carried every unsaid thing between us. I could have reached further. Could have taken her hand fully. I didn't. Neither of us did. Instead, I asked, so what do we do? Her eyes met mine. Wet, shining in the kitchen light. She gave the faintest shake of her head, like the answer was too big for either of us. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, We just stay here a minute. No promises. No decisions. Just that. I nodded. Okay. And for once, that was enough? Part 7. The conclusion, slow emotional closure. Months passed before it felt ordinary again. Not empty, just ordinary. Daniel graduated, moved out, called less. I saw him sometimes, but not like before. Our lives had shifted, quietly, without anyone announcing it. I still went to the coffee shop most mornings. 8:47 a.m., my usual black coffee. Sometimes she was there too, sometimes not. When she was, she'd order tea, chamomile, the same as always. We didn't make a show of it. We didn't need to. Just sitting near each other was enough. The first time we ended up back at the park bench, it wasn't planned. We'd both taken the long way home, and there it was, waiting. We sat down like it belonged to us. I used to think silence meant something was wrong, I told her. And now it feels like the only part that makes sense. She smiled at that, the kind of smile that didn't need to be big to be true. Her hand rested on the bench between us. Not reaching, not hiding. Just there. I let mine sit close enough that the space between felt deliberate. Nothing dramatic happened. No sudden declarations. Just two people who'd stopped pretending they hadn't already chosen each other. Life didn't turn perfect. She still had days where the past pressed too hard. I still caught myself doubting where I fit in her world. But then she'd make tea while I sat at the kitchen table, or I'd fix something small around the house without being asked, and it felt like balance. Quiet, fragile maybe, but real. Sometimes she still teased me about stirring my coffee too long. Sometimes I teased her about leaving books unfinished. We'd both laugh, knowing those things had been there from the start. I think about that moment on the bench, months earlier, when she'd asked me, "Would you?" I never answered then. But every time I show up now, every coffee, every walk, every quiet evening, I feel like I finally have. And she knows. That's enough.